I want to thank everyone for joining us today. My name is Amy Hennon. I am the Director of Advocacy and Financial Stabilization at the Maryland Volunteer Lawyer Service. We have a really compelling and exciting presentation for you today on telling our clients' stories. I'm going to launch our super fun, well, where did that go? All right, our super fun PowerPoint. And that is not right. It's not sharing the wrong screen. Whoops. There we go. Peter and Nicole, can you both see the proper screen now?
I still see it in PowerPoint rather than slideshow.
Okay. Let me try this again. See, apparently I should have been practicing more. Okay. How's that?
Yes.
There we go.
Hooray. We got there eventually. All right. I'm going to drop the bios for Nicole and Peter into the chat. If I can get there. And y'all can learn about how fabulous and amazing both of them are. And then while I'm doing that, we can move on with learning about how to tell the stories of the people that we are working with. So Nicole, I will let you take it from here while I figure out how to share your bio in the chat and then Peter's bio.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so this is a really important topic, figuring out how to tell the client story, how to get the client story out of them, and then partner with them to tell it. Because, as you see here, and I think many of us have experienced this, is that clients get very overwhelmed when you're preparing them for any kind of hearing. Even if someone has a great case, a lot of people just feel intense pressure going into court and speaking in front of judges. I've had so many times clients ask me, when we're talking about a hearing, am I going to have to talk before the judge? Am I going to have to talk to them? And the relief that you see play over people's faces when, if you're able to tell them, oh no, this is just kind of a simple matter and I'll do the talking, the relief that plays over their faces is, very intense. And a lot of cases, on top of that kind of inherent pressure of court, a lot of cases carry shame and value judgments for folks, especially with respect to debt collection and other kind of consumer matters. You know, it causes them a lot of stress, you know, and we've all seen it.
I'll just jump in that, you know, I have had, I've had a couple of clients that I deal with a number of clients that have a lot of debt. I deal with clients that are thinking about bankruptcy. I deal with clients that are, that potentially I deal with a lot of older adult clients who are, kind of recently retired. Maybe they've had a loss of income and they are overwhelmed with their debt. The number of clients I've had kind of crying because they felt so much relief, because we were able to do a little something to kind of help take that pressure off them, it's a large number of clients. But I will say that I have had some clients where like the stress and the shame and everything that comes with it has really been too much for them. And I've had some clients that wound up kind of, you know, deciding that they did not want to, this was sort of the end of the road for them, and they didn't want to engage with the process anymore. It was all too much. It was all too overwhelming. And they wound up ending their lives, which is like the stress and the shame that can come with all of this is immense. But we can not get too bogged into that, and we'll.
Yeah, but I mean, and it's absolutely true.
Okay, I'm going to handle the next slide, but I really want to underscore what Amy just said. She literally has had clients who ended their life over the stress of perhaps not knowing how to articulate and tell their story and what's going on with them and how to reach out. So this seminar today is so important. It's about communication. We're calling it storytelling, but as you'll see, it's really about effective communication. And that could apply, you know, this is a group of lawyers we're talking to, but everything from, you know, courtroom, boardroom, family member. How do we communicate better? And what we're focusing on today is this concept of storytelling. And before I get to this slide, I just want to give you everything in a nutshell. I was recently working with a person, and to get them warmed up, I said, tell us about a place that, you know, is meaningful to you. And this person says, well, I love going to the beach. And, you know, what do you love about the beach? I love the, you know, the sound of the water and the waves and the people running around and everything. And so using the methods we're going to teach today, I said, well, let's go a little deeper. Can you just close your eyes for me and just take us there? And so a beautiful day at the beach with kids running around turned into this very rapidly. I'm in my car and I'm driving up and I'm parking, and there's a smile on my face, and I roll the windows down and I'm starting to hear the seagulls, and then that salt air comes in and I'm smelling it. And I walk out of my car and I pick up the picnic basket, and I open the trunk and I get the blankets out, and we're walking down, and you see the difference, right? When this person is doing that live, I'm there. I'm like watching the movie, and I'm feeling it, and I'm smelling the smells, and I'm hearing the sounds. And so what we're going to talk about today, this storytelling, it's helping to communicate that as if you were watching a movie rather than just telling me the beach is a really nice place. You're making me feel it. And if I feel it, then I'm going to empathize with you, and I'm going to go on that journey with you. Okay. And speaking of journeys, this slide talks about the hero's journey, right? And we all love heroes. And something that someone taught me recently is the plot is not about what happened. Okay, the plot's not what happened. The plot is, how did the protagonist respond and react to the events that's happening? That's the story, right? That's the hero's journey through challenge and turmoil, is what did this person do to cope with it? And as you hear that story, as you heard my story about getting out of the car and the sights and the sounds of the beach, what did you personally relate to, right? What part of my story or what part of my client's story is the judge or the jury or the mediator or the opposing counsel or the family member going to relate to? Because we all are a compilation of our own stories, and certain things are going to resonate with certain people and others not. And through these communication techniques, through learning how to tell a story, there's going to be parts of your client's story that someone latches onto and relates to. And if they can relate to them, then they're viewing your person as a human, engaged in a hero's journey, rather than, a legal problem. So rather than this is another debt collection case and people should pay their debts, and this woman looks really nice, but she just admitted she didn't pay her rent. Okay, that's a legal problem, as opposed to really humanizing the person and understanding the journey. And then suddenly, the person is interested, the decision maker is interested, and they're looking for a way to help rather than to create distance. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so when is storytelling significant? Always. It helps to develop what happened. It helps to clarify motives, negotiation, establishing damages, everything. Again, if I'm presented with someone that didn't pay her rent, so she's being evicted, okay, that's a very small universe. If I, through storytelling and starting to get to know that person, I find out, well, the reason that she didn't pay her rent was because 2 months earlier, somebody was murdered on the front steps of her stoop, and she's been complaining to the landlord and the management company, asking for more security and requesting a new apartment. And they told her the new apartment's ready and we're going to be moving you across town, and don't pay your rent this month because, we're going to comp the rest of the month while we move. That's because I took the time to engage and learn the story. I actually learned really crucial facts, so that if I'm in court and I have the collection lawyer who doesn't know any of that background, because this was one of 4,000 cases they were sent last month for evictions or what have you, now we're rolling. So it is always significant. It starts with the very first contact you have with the prospective client.
Just to thinking about kind of not just the courtroom, but what about kind of using this framework when we're thinking about other kinds of advocacy, if we're thinking about legislative advocacy, if we're thinking about kind of using this in a variety of ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if anyone here on this call has ever testified in the legislature, again, you're testifying in front of somewhere between 5 and 25 people. They're reading their emails, they're checking their phones, they're doing other things. And if I can break through and suddenly they put their phone down, they say, well, I'm listening now. This person is telling me about their life. I can relate to this. And so again, whatever your issue is, and the three of us, I think, have all been in Annapolis together testifying at one point or another. If I'm saying, well, this is a consumer bill and we really think that, there should be these added protections and this is really important, that's telling them why, as opposed to, let you meet this client and let's hear what she went through. And then suddenly they're listening and then it all makes sense. So then you line up, the policy that's being sought with, the problem and how the two are related.
Absolutely. And I think that's an important point too, because really these kinds of techniques are useful for any kind of advocacy, especially when you have someone that may not necessarily be sympathetic to the audience. And if you can tap into their internal narratives and make and kind of recast that narrative into, take something that they find foreign or off-putting and recast that into something that's familiar or positive, it'll just make your case that much more persuasive.
Yeah.
Okay,
All right.
next slide. I'm talking here about narrow angle, wider angle, and widest angle, and I'll get to this slide in a minute. I want to tell you about a real life case I was involved in, and this power of storytelling and going through the facts. This was a person that we were preparing for a deposition, and it involved wrongful debt collection and wrongful threats of foreclosure. And so it was a very long deposition, and the large law firm commercial litigator got to the question of damages, and they said, as they typically do, well, you're claiming this emotional distress. Tell me, what do you mean? Tell me about the emotional distress. And a lot of people would be off-put if they're not prepared. Well, I don't really know. That's what the words the lawyer used. I don't know. I was really upset. You were really upset? Yeah, I really was upset. It really bothered me. Okay. But through going through this storytelling thing and developing it, here's what happened in this deposition. Wow, emotional distress. Tell me, foreclosure. Tell me, what do you mean? And my client leans over the table. He leans in to the defense lawyer and he says, do you know what it's like to come home at night and tell your wife and kids that you might be losing your house? It was so emotional. It was so powerful. The deposition basically was over at that point because the other attorney's like, please no, like the emotional stuff is making me uncomfortable. But it was said with such passion that when this lawyer then had to report back, I mean, were there damages? Were there emotional damages in the case? Absolutely. It was conveyed really strongly. Okay. And so this slide we're looking at talks about narrow angle, well, they're harassing me because they're trying to get a debt I don't owe, just like the guy I just told about. The wider angle, after we spent some time, is, well, they were calling day and night, and it seemed like I couldn't get a second. I couldn't even think about anything else. It was so stressful. Now you feel a little bit more, more invested. You have a clearer picture anyway. And then what we call the widest angle, after working with them and putting them back into really what were some things that happened. Then we get to, I remember that first collection letter. I was sitting in my bedroom on the chair next to my desk, texting with my mother when I saw and opened that letter. My heart started racing, my head started swimming, and I felt sick to my stomach. I texted my mother that I just needed to go to the bathroom. Okay, that is a very clear picture of what was the impact, what was the impact of this debt collection. I have a much clearer picture through this wider angle than, yeah, it was really upsetting. Okay, next slide, please. I'm sorry, go back to that one. The question is, I can just tell you that's a wider angle. Obviously it is. The question is, how do we get there? How do we discover those facts? And more importantly, when we go back to the very first slide that talked about don't do this and don't say that and don't guess and don't estimate and remember this, where your client is feeling paralyzed. How could this client remember these wide angle facts? How could they remember that first collection letter? The way they're going to remember it is because you've spent the time talking to them and saying things like, so when did this start? When was the first time you knew about this debt? And they'll say, well, it started with a phone call. Well, could you take me there? Where were you sitting? What time of year was it? Who else was present? And if you kind of walk them through that, then when the question arises at trial or in a deposition, they're not talking from memory. They're going back there and they're seeing it and feeling it. They're going back to the beach and they're getting out of the car, rolling the window down, hearing the gulls, smelling the salt come in, picking up the cooler from the back, opening the trunk for the blankets and watching the kids play around. Right? Okay, next slide, please.
And so how do we discover the story? I guess is the first question here. So that's going to be an ongoing process. This may be an iterative kind of process. So you can start with the complaint and begin building from there. When you get discovery responses, that may be a time to, when you're working on your responses to discovery, that may be a time to do a session like this with a client, after you've concluded some other research or investigation. But so we'll show you some techniques about that, about how to discover the story. Then, of course, you need to organize the story. These things don't come out in a linear fashion from clients. They come out just based on stream of consciousness or how they're responding to their emotions, and you have to untangle it. And so once you've got that organized, then you've got to retell or deliver or present that story. And so we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So truth and trust are absolutely essential to this process with the techniques that we're going to show you. Witness testimony is about truth telling. That is rule number one. And that's not just factual truth, but also emotional truth. And you can't have truth telling without trust. And that is a two-way street between the lawyer and the client and between the witness and the listener. And being truthful requires a willingness to be vulnerable. And people are more likely to be vulnerable with you if you show them that you're willing to be vulnerable as well. So, you have to run toward the danger in a sense. The idea of being vulnerable with your client can, it seems like a little bit of an awkward kind of idea, right? And it can stir up some fears or concerns, but you've got to run toward that danger. So the client has fears, and of course, we're kidding ourselves if we don't realize that we have fears as well. So we have to confront that a little bit. And so all of that's going to require some time investment. Next slide.
Before you go on to that, next slide, I totally agree with what you're saying, what Nicole is saying, but the other investment, it requires some time investment, she said. Absolutely true. But it also requires that emotional investment, the willingness on our part as an advocate to take a risk, to ask the uncomfortable question. Sometimes we talk about danger points. What is the thing you're like, man, I hope this doesn't come up in this case, or I don't want to even ask them about their 4 prior convictions or something. Let's just hope that we don't go there. Well, sometimes with a little, audacity, let's talk about your 4 convictions. What was that about? And maybe you're going to really learn something that's really valuable. So run toward the danger. What you don't know, you can't protect yourself against, let alone your client, or yourself emotionally. And sometimes the things that we most fear and we most avoid turn into the strongest parts of the case. I've seen it happen over and over again. Unless you're willing to take the risk, you can always edit it out, right? We're making a film here, right? Like any great film, you watch a biography of someone, it's a 90-minute movie about an 80-year life. So we are exploring scenes to put together our film. So don't be afraid to film the 4 prior convictions. You can always leave it on the editing floor, but the point is you got to explore it. Okay, I apologize, Nicole, go ahead.
No, I completely agree.
I think that it's also worth sort of kind of really sitting in the idea that in order to kind of elicit this vulnerability from your client and really get to the full story, you have to demonstrate that you have to be vulnerable with the client as well, and that you really, like, you have to be willing to show that you're sharing your part, some of yourself with them as much as you want them to share with you, so that they don't feel like, this is that they feel like they have a genuine relationship with you. This is if you create some sort of power dynamic between the lawyer and the client, it can really help set up a wall almost between you two. And so, and of course you want to be thoughtful and careful about the things that you say to your client, but you want them to also share in who you are so that they feel like they can talk to you about the like deep, intimate, personal details that are going to become important in their case.
Okay, so where to begin? Client's life story. Okay, where are you from? What kind of family did you grow up in? How far did you go in school? What was important to you? Who were the important people in your life as you're growing up? That doesn't take 18 hours to do that. That could I just fired those questions. That could be an hour if you wanted it, but it might be 5 minutes, and it's establishing some rapport, some bedside manner. Oh, really? Well, you're from there. Well, let me tell you about me and how I was brought up, and tell you about my dysfunctional family, and the struggles that I've had. They're different than yours, but we all have loved and we all have lost. So I'm going to share with you a little bit about my love and my loss because I'm asking you about yours. So where to begin? A logical thing is, tell me a little bit about yourself. You can go with the occurrence. What was it? Was it a car accident? Is it a debt collection thing? Is it a foreclosure? Whatever it is. And you recall earlier, I had the person sitting on their bed next to their bedside table, texting with their mom. You don't forget these things. You could also begin with the rules or the themes of the case. Okay, we need to prove, statute of limitations is an issue in this thing. So let's talk about 3 years ago. Where were you more than 3 years ago? Is that when you got, is that when this happened more than 3 years ago? And then you can move around, you move around as necessary. And it doesn't really matter. You can jump around, jump between the different things, and don't be afraid to pull on threads. Okay, they always say lawyers, have to think on their feet, and sometimes if we have too much of an agenda or too much of an outline, we don't really listen and pull on that thread when something is thrown out there. What feels most authentic about this to you, and is the story larger than this case or the occurrence? Is this a universal life story? Is this the story of a landlord tenant thing? Is this the story of somebody being forced to live in a crime infested and rat infested apartment like 18 other people we've represented from the same, management company? Is this a larger case, or is this a one-off, an individual? We won't know until we delve. Okay, the next slide. So now we're in the lights, camera, action. So we're going to go eventually, no matter where we start, we are going to go through the entire occurrence. What happened. We are going to use those 5 senses that I started with at the beach. Where am I sitting? What am I smelling? What am I hearing? What do I see in front of me? What does it feel like? Am I sitting in a soft chair? Those sound like stupid questions, right? The reason they're not stupid is because they get us in the scene so that, again, we can relive what the critical points of our story are when we're making our movie, our 90-minute movie of the 80-year-long life. What are those critical things? And by getting into asking, what did the chair feel like? What did it smell? You're getting the person there so that they are literally like inside of their body, and they are narrating and they are living it in the present tense. So that, again, no matter how nervous they are in court or testifying in the legislature or being deposed, no matter how nervous they are, they can go back there. That person can go back to their car with the window down, smelling the salt air, and it's boom. It's just, I'm feeling it, so I'm reliving it, recreating it. and not having to worry about remembering something, which is hard to remember things, right? Remember not to forget this. You know, that's really hard for most of us.
Don't remember, relive.
Yeah, don't remember, relive. Exactly. So whether, you know, you go through the five senses if you can remember them, and I can't, so I'm like, okay, sight, yeah, smell, taste, touch, sound, right? And then the most important, that's not, that they don't mention when they talk about the five, is the feelings. You know, what's happening inside of your body. You know, as you're sitting in that car, you've just parked by the beach, we know what you're smelling and think, but how does that make you feel inside? What is your, you know, what does your body feel? Well, I feel relaxed. I feel like this big exhale, right? And I feel just so relaxed. Or how do you feel as you're sitting there texting your mom with that collection letter, and you feel like you have to go to the bathroom? Oh my God, I feel like I'm going to throw up. My shoulders are tight. I feel sick to my stomach. So, okay, relive, don't remember. Now, one other thing, as we're working through this and we get to, okay, these are the scenes we want to do, okay? You know, we're getting closer to the deposition. We're getting closer to the trial, okay? We know these are the four, you know, these are the three scenes that, you know, that if nothing else gets conveyed to the judge, we want to have, we want to be able to convince the judge about what happened when they signed that lease. You know, the lease signing occurred in this circumstance, and that's important to the case because, and we also want to talk to the judge about what happened on the day of eviction, because that was really important, because that's when something else happened. When we have those, we've explored them, we're able to do them. Then a really useful thing that I learned is using your iPhone, or if it's on Zoom like we are now, and literally you can just tape the person for a few minutes, and you can watch it and they can watch it. And I did this once, the first time I did it, and the client was phenomenal. I mean, we had an amazing case, and the deposition was about to happen, and then suddenly it was like this, and it's like, yes, my name is this, and I'm not going to make any eye contact with you. And all I needed to do was to just video it with my iPhone and just show it to the person, and they're like, I get it, you know, I get it. I have to look into the camera if I want to, you know, communicate this issue and everything. I have to speak loud, and I have to look at the camera and all the rest of it. So that's a really powerful thing in terms of persuasion. It is not persuasive when I look down and I talk softer, because I'm kind of afraid of, you know, somebody might yell at me, or the judge isn't going to really believe me. And since I know the judge isn't really going to believe me, I'm going to talk in a way that's not really going to sound believable, and then it's going to confirm, you know, what I knew all along. I'm just going to lose, as opposed to, this is what happened. You know, I was sitting by the bed, on the bed, when the letter came. I was sitting in the car when I rolled down the window, and the sounds and the smells came in. One of my favorite sayings: nothing rings true like the truth. The truth is full of contradictions. It's a windy path. It's not a straight path. And when you're telling the truth, and you're telling the factual truth and the emotional truth, it's not going to be a straight path and always consistent. It's filled with things that make it sound like it's true. I always tell the clients, along with that, is if I don't know something, I can't protect you against it. So just like I look at my own danger points, when I've gained the client's confidence and work with them, you know, what is it that, like, you really hope that nobody ever knew about you? You know, what is it that you really hope would never come out? And if I don't know about that, I can't, you know, protect against it. What do you hope they won't ask you about? And then that can be one of those things: run towards the danger. Well, why do you hope they don't? Okay, I understand that's embarrassing or whatever. Don't worry, and this is again, if they're being testifying or about to be deposed, one of the main things is you're telling your story. Do not worry if they don't cover something that was a really important part of your story, because that's what I'm for. If you left something out or they didn't ask about something, I now know the story and I can, ask on a redirect or a cross. Okay, next slide, please.
Okay, so let's walk through kind of another example of this. So imagine that you have a case where your client has recently moved and the former landlord is seeking damages because they moved without notice and the unit was messy. And the client comes to you and is like, well, that was true. So you're looking at this case going, what am I going to do with this, right? But so let's step back a little bit. So let's look at the wider angle. Once you asked, well, so tell me what it was like to live there. Why did you move? What was going on? Was there a reason that you moved? And left belongings behind? Okay, so maybe it turns out I got into an argument with a neighbor, and so that's why I moved. I felt like I had to move. Okay, so let's pull on this thread a little bit and find out some more. So, and so of course this isn't all going to happen in 5 minutes, but once you've had a chance to sit with the client, you've gotten to know them, they trust you. They are able to finally kind of open up, and maybe they didn't realize that this was relevant before, so they didn't bring it up. But now you have a story where this particular neighbor, there's kind of always been conflict. It's been ramping up. And then now we have this kind of very explosive confrontation where the client feels like they're in danger. Now, so let's look at this text here, and you can see where like some of like the techniques that Peter was talking about are right here. His breath was hot. I got drops of spit in my eye. Those kind of little details that put the listener right in that place with them, right? Just reliving it. His voice was breaking. He was banging on the wall next to me. I could hear other apartments getting quiet. And so, now you've got a really great story about why they left. So if you hadn't pulled on that thread and pushed back and asked more questions of the client, you would have been left with that very simple story of, what the landlord said is true. I left without notice and I left a mess. But so with these techniques, you've got a much more powerful and persuasive narrative that you can share.
And I would just say, who among us would not move out when confronted with these facts? I'm just focused on, I got drops of spit in my eye. What a strong picture that conjures up for me. Could you imagine someone is yelling at you so loud and so close to you that their spit is getting, it's disgusting, but it's also really scary. And it's for me, such a powerful image. I would, I get it. If I'm the judge that has to decide this case, like, wow, that's kind of different than the last 40 cases I heard where the person just said, yeah, I didn't pay the rent.
Yeah. And, it is visceral and it is memorable, and it's very different from what you would ordinarily get in a client interview where they just say, neighbor got in my face, so I moved. It's a lot more detailed, a lot more memorable, a lot more persuasive.
Yeah, and that client, this fact thing, maybe that client didn't really want to say more than, well, the neighbor was just always abusive and aggressive, and if you don't, a lot of people aren't going to want to offer, this level of detail. Why? Lots of reasons, but one is there's an emotional investment on the part of the client to relay that to you. That's emotional. And somebody saying that, I wouldn't be surprised if they start crying right there on the spot. You know, it was horrible. I mean, he spit in my eye, you know? So there's an emotional investment of vulnerability to get him to say that.
Absolutely.
Okay, could we get the next slide? So we are in the home stretch here. What is the result? Okay, think back to our first slide of don't do this and remember that and remember not to forget this and forget about that. No, we are doing storytelling. I know my client knows what the story is. We've been over it, and they can go back inside their body and relive, you know, what the key events are. So here's what this client is feeling. My lawyer knows the whole story and knows exactly what to ask, and I know what to say. I can fix any mistakes I make, right? I don't care if I misspeak and I say the light was red when I meant it was green. That's because I'm human, and nothing rings true like the truth. So it's like, you know what? I said it was red. It actually was green. You're lying? No, I'm just so nervous that I said red, you know, and okay, I can fix any mistake. I'm going to listen to every question. I'm going to pause, and then I'm going to respond. I'm going to think in the present tense like I'm there again and just roll the tape, because that is the easiest thing to do. I don't have to remember anything if I can just get in the present tense and roll the tape. This is my chance to tell my story my way. Okay, you can ask me whatever questions you want, judge or opposing counsel, because I know what my story is, and it is coming out whether you like it or not. I have power. I'll ask them to repeat the question. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid to say I was distracted. I'm not afraid to say I wasn't listening. I'm not afraid to say I'm freaking out. I'm so nervous that I need you to repeat the question. I know I can take breaks because I have power. Right? And it's my story in my case. And if I need to take a break, I'm going to say I need a break. And it's okay to ask for clarification. You know, I don't really know what, Nicole used a word at the very beginning, and I didn't interrupt her because we're doing a taped thing, but I didn't know what the word meant. You know, it's okay. There's a lot of words I don't know what they mean. And, you know, call me stupid, but I'm not stupid enough to not ask for clarification if I don't understand something. And the main thing is, I always promise my clients, I promise you, this is going to be easier than the prep work that we did. And I think what's on this slide in the big letters on the left is really important. Is like, depending on the kind of case, we're not going to win every case, but this idea of people having their day in court, that even if you don't win, the client got to tell their story, and depending on, you know, the person's walk in life and what the facts are, that's really important. You know, it's really important to tell the truth. You know, even if the case you don't prevail, your client went through something that brought them to a place like MVLS. So I'm going to say it's a little bit traumatic, and that they're at the lower end of the economic scale and the lower end of the power scale in our society. And you took the time to invest, to discover their story, and you enabled them, you helped them, you partnered with them to tell their authentic story in the public square. That is an awesome power.
Yeah, and that's so important. Just for them to have felt heard, and absolutely for them to have had a chance to tell their authentic story. You know, because if they get on the stand and just say, oh yeah, well, yeah, the allegations are true, or, you know, yeah, my neighbor got in my face, so I left. And they haven't had the chance to express their authentic truth, then they're gonna be leaving a bit unsatisfied. You know, and especially if you don't prevail, you know, they'll feel like they left some things on the table, and you will too. But certainly, this process can be very raw. So it absolutely, the actual event will be so much easier than the prep work.
And your chances of winning are exponentially higher. I mean, a lot of this, the MVLS type of work, you know, a lot of it's in the district court. And so for anybody watching this session, if you've ever been in the district court, you might have had a chance to watch a pro se litigant, and they say, you know what, I lost, but they actually will thank the judge for listening to their thing and stuff, even though they lost. You do these methods, your chances of not losing, your chances of your client prevailing just go up exponentially, because it's a human drama, it's a human story, and your cause is just and righteous. And so there's no reason you shouldn't be winning a lot more of the time.
So now is a fabulous time for questions, if anyone has any, or if they have kind of a sort of scenario they want to talk about or think through. While you're putting those into the Q&A box, I'm just going to flag for everyone that you want to follow us on social media, you want to hear about upcoming trainings that we're doing or other things that we've got going on. There are lots of different ways to check in with us. This video will later be uploaded to YouTube and will be viewable again. If you're looking for how to take on a pro bono case, you'll go to our website, you'll click on the pro bono portal, and that'll take you to the list of all the cases that we have right now available so that you can tell these clients' stories and with the help that they need. We also have a ton of other trainings available in all of these different subject areas. And finally, if you're not already an MVLS volunteer, you can sign up to be one, and then you can start doing this stuff and working with these clients, which is what we're all about. So with that, I'm gonna.
Let me throw in one other thing, Amy, also for anyone who's taking an MVLS case, if you wanted some help with these techniques, I'd be happy to do it. You could contact me, mention that you're working on an MVLS case, and I'm happy to work directly with you and your client to develop the storytelling. And I'll speak for Nicole. I'm sure she'd be happy to do it as well. So.
Absolutely. And it also reminds me of one thing that kind of came up the last time we did this presentation. So if it turns out that your client's story includes, severe trauma or abuse, you may want to have some kind of like professional with you, a therapist, a counselor, something like that, before you kind of open that can of worms. That's something you don't want to necessarily go in and have this person reliving in the present tense, some kind of, extreme trauma without some kind of additional support, so that you're leaving your client better than you found them, not opening up that can of worms and then, not giving them any place to put it.
I think that's so important. This is not therapy. We're not therapists, and we could do damage. And the first rule is do no harm. So yes, if you are dealing with someone that has had a trauma, or they indicate to you right off the bat, I am not going there. Well, we are never going to push someone somewhere they don't want to go. And we're never going to push them somewhere that we don't want to go. So I think that's really important, Nicole. Thanks for pointing that out.
So I'm now having a weird technical difficulty. Am I still sharing my screen?
Yes.
What do you see?
Blue.
Blue, just blue. Great.
I see a lot of blue, and I see a couple of participants.
It looks like it looks like a screen.
Somebody's got to ask a question.
I don't know how to unshare my screen. They're like the controls that are usually at the top of the screen are gone. And so I can't get back to the chat. And so I don't know what's happening here.
I can see the chat if you just go to the bottom. But nobody is asking any questions yet that I can see.
Well,
Peter, can you speak more to, because, when I've been present for these kind of psychodramas, you call them, when we have these sessions, it's usually been in a litigation context. And we talked a little earlier about how you could use this in a different kind of advocacy context, but I'd love to hear you say more about that, because even our examples have been litigation focused. And, I want to make sure that we really demonstrate how transferable this is to other contexts.
Yeah, I mean, so for the other thing is we have a group that meets once a month where we go over use these methods, and it is a group of lawyers, so we either work on their case, but a lot of times just on on a personal thing. I mean, this is, again, it's communication, and so it could be an issue you're having with your spouse, a family member, a parent, and what we explore is not just setting the scene, where were you, but the next level of this stuff is actually like role playing. And so the way we would use that in the litigation context, using the debt collection example we've been talking about, like I'll say, okay, so it was a phone call. Okay, so I'm the collector. What happens? I'm picking up, I'm calling you. What do I say? And they'll give the script, and they can get a chance to then be the debt collector and look at it from their perspective. It all goes back to Atticus Finch, the idea of walking in someone else's shoes. And we always hear that. What's it like to walk in someone else's shoes? So using these techniques, some people refer to them as psychodrama or psychodramatic techniques. It's basically walking in all of the shoes of each of the major players in any particular circumstance. So I did one once where we literally recreated my large family dining room table. Okay. And we recreated a conversation that happened among my large family. I mean, it could be used in anything, but as a result of that issue personally, where I did a large family dining room table, I was able to get in touch with some feelings and actually able to say some things, to articulate some things, both to myself and other people, that I might not have otherwise been able to do. So communication. This applies to everything from your personal life to your professional life. By the way, medical schools, I'm told, use psychodrama a lot to teach bedside manner. So the doctor will pretend I'm the person that just woke up in surgery, and they'll lie in the bed, and feel, what does it feel like to have, somebody walk in with a white coat and start poking your surgical wound or whatever. And so the walking in the other person's shoes. I don't know if that answered your question or not, Nicole.
Yeah, I think that's great. And yeah, I think it really did. And
Uh-oh.
Is Amy still there?
Wait a minute. Participants. It says we have 4 participants, so I think she's
There she is.
there. She is.
She's
We have
back.
5 participants. Yeah.
But and I think what you just said, Peter, also, speaks to your willingness to be vulnerable, and just to kind of flesh out what we were saying earlier a little bit about being vulnerable as the attorney. Once you've kind of committed to going there with your clients, to taking on that approach, you want to do it carefully. You want to have boundaries. But I think that just requires some intention and some pre-planning. And so sometimes, you can think about what would I share with the client, and think in advance, what kind of things do I want to share about myself, and what is going to be out of bounds for me. And if you think about it ahead of time, when you're in the moment with the client, and you can see that some vulnerability is in order to build that trust, then you have kind of a story already in your pocket, and it's authentic and it's true, and it's vulnerable, but you've also thought about it enough that you don't get caught up in the moment and go past the boundary that you'd want to set. You don't want to walk away regretting how far you went, or go so far that the moment becomes more about you.
Yeah, I mean, real life example, I do a lot of debt collection harassment cases, and I always share, um, I can remember standing, in my kitchen in the middle of dinner with my family, and yet again, this debt collector calls trying to collect a debt from me that I did not owe. And I'm sitting there and I'm screaming as my kids are scared, they're scared, and my wife, and I remember what that felt like, the tightness in my chest and how loud I was screaming. And I'll share that to say, I don't know about your situation, but I do understand a little bit about what it feels like to be, persecuted for a debt that you literally don't owe, and they just won't leave you alone. And so that's like a share for that kind of thing. Another thing that we often use with this technique is going back to my example of at the beach with the windows down. Is like I could say, so Nicole, is there anything about that story, being at the beach, and that happy feeling? Is there anything about that that you can, relate to from your personal life? And you might say, yeah, has nothing to do with beaches, but whenever I go to, the Ravens games, I get there and I feel this and I smell that and I feel that same type of joy or something. And so we've just made a connection there, right? Beaches and football, no connection otherwise, but we're connecting on an emotional level of what it feels like to be happy in a situation like that.
Absolutely. I mean, and it really can also help you in some senses lawyer across difference yourself, because, just as your clients may not be, their life stories may not be familiar, or sympathetic to outsiders, they may not be familiar or sympathetic to you.
Oh,
And so,
absolutely.
you can work in this way to try and build that connection for yourself as well.
Absolutely. The universal human truths are shared by everybody. And especially, we're living in a country that's so divided on so many bases. Um, but I'm convinced, I don't care who the person is or how much you may disagree with them ideologically or what they've done, there is a place where you share in common with them. Okay. Everybody was born, everybody has experienced some form of loss, some form of joy, and those connections are there. And this method helps us make those connections and helps us as advocates, present those connections to, decision makers on the other side.
Um, Peter and Nicole, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and experiences. It's so valuable. I did finally, after some mild technical wildness, I did finally get Peter's information into the chat. I got Nicole's information into the chat, and then some further reading that is powerful and important. And I just want to thank you both so much for being with us here today, and all the hard work that you both do. And hope that everyone viewing this has a great rest of your day.
Thank
Thanks,
you too, Amy. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.